phone buzzed in her coat pocket and she saw the name, Dr. Celeste Harmon. Her heart dropped. Stepping outside into the humid air, she answered with practiced calm. "Serena, I wanted to give you the results personally," the doctor said gently. "I'm so sorry. The tests confirm ovarian insufficiency. The hormone levels, they're final." Serena stood frozen on the cobblestone sidewalk, the sounds of traffic blurring into white noise. "You're saying," she began, but her voice faded. "Natural conception isn't possible," Dr. Harmon clarified. "There are options, of course. Egg donors, surrogacy, but your own fertility window has closed." Serena's breath caught. She had spent the last 3 years chasing hope, injections, hormone schedules, ovulation monitors, false positives, and now, just like that, the door was locked. The future she had planned with Julian, cribs, lullabies, messy breakfasts, was gone. Around her, Charleston moved on in slow, southern rhythm, but Serena remained still, glassy-eyed. She slipped her phone into her purse, straightened her blazer, and walked back inside. She had a bride to congratulate. Her own world had ended, but no one knew, yet. That night, long after the boutique closed and the city's gas lamps flickered to life, Serena sat curled on the velvet couch of her restored colonial home, a glass of red wine untouched in her hand. Julian was working late again, or so he said. She reached for the old tablet they kept on the coffee table, planning to review guest seating charts. The screen lit up with a cascade of unread notifications, texts, photos, emails unsynced from Julian's phone. Her thumb hovered, hesitated, then tapped. The first message opened automatically. "Miss you already. Your hands on me. Still thinking about last night." It was from Callie Blake, her best friend, business partner, and the woman she had trusted with everything from her company's finances to her deepest heartbreaks. Serena blinked, then tapped into the message history. The evidence was immediate and cruel. Weeks of late-night rendezvous, stolen weekends at coastal inns, and messages that oozed with intimacy. As she scrolled further, the gut punch intensified. Some of the messages overlapped with nights Julian had missed her IVF appointments or forgotten to pick up prescriptions. He'd lied, again and again, while Callie smiled across conference tables and toasted Serena's future motherhood. At wine night, her hands shook, and the tablet slipped, landing on the floor with a dull thud. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was surgical, slicing clean through the life Serena thought she'd built. And yet, she didn't scream. Not yet. Something deeper was forming inside her. Something cold. Something sharp. Serena had rehearsed the confrontation 100 different ways. She imagined slamming the tablet on the dining table, demanding answers through gritted teeth, forcing Julian and Callie to explain the unimaginable, but the next morning shattered any plan she'd carefully stitched together. It was a quarterly team meeting at the downtown office. Serena, Julian, Callie, and their 5 staff members gathered to discuss upcoming weddings. Serena wore a cream blouse and her calmest smile, even as her stomach churned with betrayal. Then Callie cleared her throat, her hand instinctively brushing her midsection. "I have a little announcement," she said, eyes sparkling. "Julian and I are expecting." The room erupted in gasps and cheers. Serena sat frozen, her fingers tightening around her pen until her knuckles whitened. Julian's eyes never met hers. "We just found out," Callie added. "It's still early, but it's a miracle." Serena swallowed hard, her world tilting. A miracle. The word rang cruelly. While she'd suffered injections, surgeries, and disappointments in sterile exam rooms, they'd been creating life behind her back. No remorse, no hesitation, just a casual declaration wrapped in soft pink lies. But Serena didn't flinch. She smiled faintly, nodding like the rest, playing the part she always had, the gracious partner, the unshakable leader. Inside, her heart was collapsing, but outwardly, she was elegance incarnate. She wouldn't confront them, not yet. There were more eyes to see, more hearts to shock. If they wanted to build a future from the ashes of her pain, she'd make sure they remembered who lit the match. That night, after the miracle announcement, Serena stood alone in the candlelit kitchen of her historic Charleston home, staring at the guest list taped to the fridge. It was covered in Callie's neat cursive, planning their next gala as if nothing had shifted. Like Serena's entire world hadn't been gutted in front of her own staff. Her fingers brushed the edge of the list, then curled into a fist. If they wanted to pretend everything was perfect, she would help them, but on her terms. The setup began subtly. She started by praising Callie's pregnancy glow in front of clients, asking about nursery themes during coffee breaks. Julian, clearly rattled by her silence, kept his distance, unsure whether her calm was forgiveness or something far more dangerous. Serena used their hesitation to her advantage. She suggested they streamline their operations. Link devices for better workflow, digitize receipts for tax season. Julian agreed quickly, relieved she hadn't left him. Within days, Serena had access to both their email archives, cloud storage, and real-time locations. It was astonishing how careless betrayal became when people thought they'd gotten away with it. Between stolen invoices, secret bookings under a shell LLC, and late-night messages about launching the new brand without her, Serena realized this wasn't just personal. They were stealing her company too. But that was fine. Let them keep digging their own graves. She had built this empire from nothing, meticulous, detailed, beautiful. Now, with that same precision, she would dismantle theirs, brick by brick, smile by smile. Serena knew she couldn't do this alone, not if she wanted precision, not if she wanted the kind of retribution that didn't just sting but echoed. So she turned to the one person who'd always been in her corner, even when Julian wasn't. Eloy Bennett, a quiet, sharp-witted accountant who'd handled their books for years. Eloy had been Julian's college roommate once, but over time his loyalty had shifted quietly, firmly to Serena. Over lunch at a quiet riverside cafe, she laid out just enough to pique his interest. "I think something's being built behind my back, and I need to know where the money is going." He didn't ask questions. Within a week, he returned with a dossier thick enough to crush a marriage. There it was. Redirected vendor payments, falsified invoices, new business registrations filed in Callie's name using stolen client lists. They hadn't just betrayed her emotionally, they were erasing her professionally, repackaging her brand under a new name without her knowledge. Serena felt a cold satisfaction coil in her chest as she flipped through the pages. "They always underestimated you," Eloy said softly. "But that's going to be their downfall." With his help, she compiled spreadsheets, emails, account statements, evidence meticulously sorted and encrypted into a secure drive. The files weren't just receipts, they were ammunition, and Serena now had her first weaponized ally. She didn't need a crowd, just the right people in the right places. Julian and Callie thought she'd been blindsided, but in reality, she was just getting started. Serena understood that revenge wasn't just about evidence, it was about optics, about shaping the narrative before her enemies even knew a story was being written. And to control that narrative, she needed the right whispers in the right ears. So she invited Harper Mercer, Julian's older sister, for brunch at a charming downtown bistro. The kind Harper loved posting about on Instagram. Harper had always been the skeptical one in the family, fiercely protective of her younger brothers but no fan of Callie's theatrical charm. Over sweet tea and shrimp and grits, Serena leaned into vulnerability, letting Harper think she was still reeling from the failed IVF and that Julian had become distant since. "He's been spending more time at the new office Callie's setting up," she said softly, eyes lowered. "But I'm sure it's nothing." Harper's eyes narrowed just enough. Serena then casually mentioned how strange it was that Callie's pregnancy timeline didn't quite align with their last family trip, But maybe I'm just bad with dates lately, she added with a self-deprecating laugh. She let it hang just long enough. By dessert, Harper was full of questions Serena pretended she couldn't answer. The seed had been planted. Not an accusation, but a crack in the glass. Over the next week, Harper reached out twice, asking oddly specific questions about Julian's calendar. Serena gave vague responses, each one tipping Harper further toward suspicion. She didn't need Harper's loyalty, just her doubt. Doubt was contagious, and soon it would spread like wildfire. The moment Callie casually mentioned she hadn't had time to plan her baby shower, Serena smiled with the kind of warmth that sent a chill down Julian's spine. "Let me handle it," she offered sweetly across the office conference table. "After all, you've got enough on your plate?" Callie blinked, surprised but pleased. She thrived on attention, and the idea of Serena publicly celebrating her pregnancy made her feel invincible. Julian looked nauseous. The venue would be Serena's own garden, a sprawling, manicured space lined with crepe myrtles and white roses, perfect for an outdoor southern affair. "Something elegant," Serena suggested. "Pink and gold, maybe? Your favorites?" Callie clapped her hands, already daydreaming. Over the next few weeks, Serena threw herself into planning with obsessive precision. Customized invitations, heirloom china, imported pastries from a bakery in Savannah. She booked a string quartet, hired a professional photographer, and even designed personalized favors for each guest. Everyone in their social circle marveled at her grace, her strength, her generosity. "Serena is incredible," they whispered, "so selfless." But behind every carefully folded napkin and floral arrangement was a purpose. She arranged hidden cameras around the garden. She synced the AV system to a remote on her phone. Every detail had been orchestrated, not for celebration, but for revelation. Callie had stolen the spotlight. Serena would make sure it turned to fire. She didn't want the party to be unforgettable because of the decor. She wanted it unforgettable because no one would ever see it coming. 3 nights before the shower, Serena stood at the kitchen sink rinsing champagne flutes when she heard the soft creak of the back door. Julian entered, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, eyes heavy with something that looked like guilt, but she no longer trusted her read on him. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, just continued drying crystal. He moved closer. "I never meant for it to happen like this." Serena raised an eyebrow, still silent. She was there. "You were so focused on the treatments. I felt forgotten." The words hit, but not as hard as they would have weeks ago. She turned slowly, waiting. Julian's voice cracked. "But I miss you, Serena. God, I miss you. I can't stop thinking about us. I think I made a mistake." He reached for her wrist. She didn't pull away. "Not yet. We were supposed to have a family," he continued, and there was genuine grief in his eyes. "I should have waited. I should have fought for you." He leaned in. The air between them charged, fragile, dangerous. "Can we just start over?" he whispered. "And for a beat? Just one heartbeat." Serena nearly faltered, but then she stepped back slowly, carefully, reaching for the wine she'd poured hours earlier. "You're too late, Julian," she said quietly, not with anger but finality. What he didn't know was that every word he spoke, every confession, every regret, had been recorded. He just handed her the final nail in his own coffin. The day of the shower arrived, like a picture torn from a magazine. Sunlight filtered softly through the trees, casting golden patterns across Serena's garden, where silk-draped tables shimmered with elegance. Guests mingled under the canopy, sipping lavender lemonade and complimenting Serena on her grace. "It's astonishing," one woman whispered, "how selfless she is." Callie arrived last, glowing in blush pink chiffon, her hand perched delicately atop her belly like a trophy. "You've outdone yourself," she beamed, kissing Serena's cheek. "I told you," Serena replied, her smile gentle and razor-sharp. "I wanted today to be unforgettable." After an hour of games, gifts, and photo ops, Serena tapped her champagne flute. The chatter quieted. "Before we cut the cake," she said, "I've put together a little something to celebrate this new beginning." The guests clapped, expecting baby photos or a sentimental slideshow. Instead, the garden projector flickered to life, and the first image was a screenshot. "Julian, I can't stop thinking about you." The next, "Collie, I want to tell her, but she's so fragile right now." The air thickened. Gasps rang out as Serena's voice narrated calmly over a cascade of texts, hotel receipts, and voice memos. "This isn't just a baby shower," she said evenly. "It's a farewell party for the illusions we've all been living under." Callie stood frozen, her face drained of color. Julian, who'd slipped in moments before with a group of late-arriving male guests, was already backing away. But Serena wasn't finished, not even close. Chaos bloomed across the garden like wildfire. Callie's hands trembled as she staggered backward, knocking over a tray of petit fours, while guests sat in stunned silence, some wide-eyed, others murmuring in disbelief. Serena stood calmly, still poised in her cream lace dress, as the next slide flashed on the screen. Audio of Julian's confession, his voice crackling through the speakers, admitting he missed Serena, that he made a mistake, that the pregnancy had complicated everything. Faces turned to Julian, who looked like a man unraveling. "You recorded me?" he shouted, his mask finally slipping. "I protected you," Serena replied coolly, "until you made me your enemy." At that moment, Harper rose from her seat, arms folded, lips pressed into a flat line. "Is this why you've been ducking family dinners?" she asked Julian, her voice full of restrained fury. "Because you were too busy building a new life behind our backs." Julian's mouth opened, but no words came. Then Serena stepped forward, handing thick legal envelopes to both him and Callie. "These are finalized contracts," she said. "Effective immediately, I'm dissolving the company we built, taking my name off everything, and you," she looked at Callie, "are being sued for breach of fiduciary duty." Callie's face crumpled. Julian tried to speak again, but Serena raised a hand. "It's done." The crowd began to stir, some walking out, others still frozen. The garden, once filled with celebration, now buzzed with reckoning. And Serena, unshaken, stood at the center, her silence louder than any scream. By the next morning, the fallout had spilled far beyond Serena's garden. Screenshots and audio recordings, carefully curated and anonymously leaked, made their way into Charleston's most exclusive social circles. Event vendors pulled out of future contracts with Julian and Callie's new venture. Longtime clients withdrew bookings in droves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Callie, once the darling of Southern lifestyle blogs, found her photos quietly scrubbed from collaborations. Sponsors ghosted, invitations dried up, and the story, the betrayal, the baby shower, the receipts, took on a life of its own. "It's like something out of a movie," one post read. "She burned them without raising her voice." Julian's reputation was gutted. Not just for the affair, but for the financial deceit Serena had exposed. Vendor fraud, tax manipulation, and attempts to quietly shift assets from their joint business to a shell corporation. Investigations followed. His business license was temporarily suspended. Callie's influencer partnerships vanished overnight. The carefully constructed life they'd built on lies began to collapse brick by fraudulent brick. And Serena? She stayed silent. No interviews, no comments, just a single post. A photo of her garden the morning after. Dew on the grass, the chairs still arranged, empty. The caption read, "Truth blooms when you stop watering deception." It went viral. Everyone had underestimated her, thought she'd fold, vanish, break. Instead, she had rewritten the narrative on her own terms. And while Julian and Callie scrambled for control, Serena simply walked away, leaving them buried in the rubble they created. In the weeks that followed, Serena did what few expected. She didn't gloat, didn't seek revenge beyond what was already done. She simply rebuilt. First, she resigned from the remnants of her old company, leaving Julian and Callie with the legal wreckage they deserved. Then, using the same discipline and eye for beauty that had once shaped Charleston's most elegant weddings, she launched a new business, the Ashford Atelier, a boutique consultancy for women-led startups. Her calendar filled quickly, not just with clients, but with women who had followed her story and found quiet inspiration in her poise. She repainted her home, room by room, removing every trace of Julian's presence. The dining room, once reserved for their business dinners, became her creative studio. Her guest room transformed into a reading nook where she journaled, sipping tea as morning light poured through gauzy white curtains. The stillness, once painful, became sacred, and the silence, once deafening, was finally hers to fill. Her inbox overflowed with letters from strangers, thanking her for being the woman who stood tall when others might have crumbled. She didn't reply to most. She didn't need to. Her life no longer required an audience. What mattered now was peace, purpose, the kind of success that wasn't built on performance, but on knowing exactly who she was. She had lost nearly everything, her marriage, her business, her sense of belonging. But in shedding all of it, she found something far more powerful, herself. And she wasn't going to lose that again. 6 months into her new life, just as spring returned to Charleston with blooming dogwoods and soft jasmine-scented breezes, Serena received a call that stilled her world in the gentlest way. It was from Harbor House, the adoption agency she had quietly registered with months earlier, unsure if she'd ever feel ready to take that step. "There's a young woman," the caseworker said, "who chose you. She's due in 3 weeks. She says your story gave her courage." Serena sat in her sunlit kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, heart pounding with a mix of fear and awe. Not long after, she met Amelia, a soft-spoken teen with nervous eyes and a fierce kind of love already blooming for the child she carried. They talked for hours, about books, regrets, second chances, and by the end, Serena knew this wasn't coincidence, it was alignment. 3 weeks later, Serena stood in the delivery room, hand in hand with Amelia, as a baby boy entered the world. The first time she held him, wrapped in a hospital blanket, his tiny fingers curling instinctively around hers, the ache she'd carried for years melted into something radiant. He wasn't born of her body, but of her becoming, of loss transformed into space, of pain stretched wide enough to welcome joy. She named him August, after the month her old life ended and her new one began. And in that quiet, sacred moment, Serena finally understood. Motherhood had always been written into her story. It had just taken a different path. On warm evenings, when the magnolia trees swayed gently outside her window and August slept soundly in his crib, Serena would step into her garden, the same one where everything had fallen apart and then, miraculously, come together. The white roses had grown fuller since that day, as if fed by truth instead of soil. She'd trace her fingers along the garden table where guests once gasped in disbelief, where Callie's glass had shattered like her illusion, and she'd smile, not out of vengeance, but clarity. "They thought they were burying me," she whispered once into the quiet, "but really, they planted me." Serena no longer needed the world's applause. Her justice hadn't been about public spectacle. It was about correction, about restoring what was stolen. Her voice, her worth, her future. Julian had tried to reach out once, a clumsy letter full of half apologies and wistful what-ifs. She never responded. Some things weren't meant to be reopened. Callie had faded into obscurity, her online followers long gone, her name remembered only in whispers. Serena didn't celebrate their downfall. She simply moved beyond it. Because that's the thing about surviving betrayal. It teaches you to see with sharper eyes, to love with cleaner hands, and to never again dim your light for those who live in shadow. Living well is the best revenge, they say, but Serena disagreed. The best revenge is becoming unforgettable, and in a world that once tried to erase her, she had rewritten the story, line by line, truth by truth, until it was entirely her own. The heart of Serena's story lies in one transformative truth: you can lose everything and still win. Betrayal may shatter the life you built, but it can also reveal the strength you never knew you had. Serena didn't just survive infidelity, manipulation, and emotional devastation. She transcended it by choosing strategy over rage, dignity over drama, and purpose over pity. The real lesson is that healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. Serena didn't destroy her enemies for the sake of destruction. She exposed them to reclaim her narrative, her worth, and her future. In doing so, she reminds us that silence can be powerful, that patience can be lethal, and that the most graceful people often have the sharpest weapons. She also redefines motherhood, showing that love, not biology, is what truly makes a family. Through her journey, we learn that what feels like an ending may be the beginning of something more aligned, more honest, more you. So, if life ever hands you betrayal wrapped in false smiles and stolen dreams, remember Serena Ashford, the woman who was underestimated, betrayed, and discarded until she decided to write her own ending and made it unforgettable.